Hello parents, Grace here with Amazing Parenting. Today we're going to be talking about how to set rules and boundaries and have your children adhere to them. I'll be right back. Okay, so today, like we said, we're going to be talking about how to set rules and boundaries and have your children follow them. If you're new to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe and give us a thumbs up, share the video and leave a comment below if you've got any questions or you like the video, leave a comment below. If you are new to the channel, just to let you know that my name is Grace, and on this channel we do all things parenting. Anything to do with parenting, we talk about it on this channel. So just in case you're new, you've stumbled across this video, that's what we do here, all things parenting. Okay, let's get straight in today's session on setting rules and boundaries that your children follow. Okay, so the great thing about rules and boundaries is you don't need a plethora of rules and boundaries for your house to run smoothly. What you don't want in your home is to be so many rules and boundaries that it's so rigid for your children. Your home life is so rigid and your children can't breathe. They don't have any freedom. Okay, so you don't want too many rules and boundaries. Okay, you want your rules and boundaries to be prominent enough that your children know they need to follow them, but you don't want them overpowering them, that there's so many that they're overpowered with rules and boundaries. Okay, so your rules and boundaries need to have fundamentals and foundation. And the best thing about fundamentals and foundations, they're different for every home. So what's a fundamental in my home might not be a fundamental in your home. So you decide what you want as a fundamental in your house and what is going to be a foundation for rules and boundaries in your home. There's three areas I want to cover in this video. So the areas of rules and boundaries is how your children talk and interact with you as their parents. Secondly, how they interact with each other as siblings, and how they treat your home, how they treat their house, okay, or where you live. Those are the areas I want to cover. So once you've ascertained what your rules and boundaries are, so you've picked 2 or 3 of them, what they are, you've then picked what they are, you then need to have your children know what your rules and boundaries are. And don't think it's obvious. Don't expect your children to, don't assume that your children know what your rules and boundaries are. Even if you've told them what the rules and boundaries are, you will have to go back and go over your rules and boundaries. Okay, so explain what your rules and boundaries are. Your children need to know what the fundamentals are, because there will be things that you can negotiate with, and there will be things that are non-negotiable. This is how it is in this house. So your children need to know that from a young age. Rules and boundaries start from the age of 2 upwards. Okay, so I'll give you a story. When my son is my firstborn, when he started nursery, before he started nursery, talking about how our children interact with us, how they talk to us, how they express themselves around us. When we called him, he was to answer, yes, mummy, yes, daddy. That's how we expected him to answer. And he did that. No problem at all. He did that. But then when he started to go to nursery, we noticed when he came back and we'd call him for something, he'd answer what? What? He'd shout out, what? What do you want? What? And the first few times was like, no, I'm not having that. And we'd tell him, you don't answer like that. It's yes, mommy, it's yes, daddy. So that rule and boundary was set. But because he'd heard something different outside, he was bringing that into the home. So it's for you to then remind him what your boundary is around how he talks to you, how he addresses you. And again, that starts from a young age. You don't wait till your child is 12 and they're shouting at you and talking to you anyhow, when that's when you now want to try to correct them. No, you start from when they're young. Okay, you start from when they're young. So it's one thing to set your rules and boundaries. It's another thing when your children begin to push those boundaries, break those rules. And I always say to parents, don't be too fussed with your children pushing boundaries. All children want to know how far they can go, what they can get away with. If I do this, will my mum tell me off? If I do this, will my dad, will I get in trouble for this? All children want to know that. But the issue then arises when you allow your children to push boundaries, break rules, and you do nothing about it. That's when the problem arises. So don't get too annoyed that your children are pushing boundaries. You just push the boundary back. You just bring the boundary back in place. Like the instance with my son going to nursery. We just put that boundary back in place. No, that's not how you talk to your parents. That's not how you talk to us. And now, my son is an adult and he would never answer me what. Because that's the rule and the boundary we've had in our house since our children were very, very young. So set your rules and boundaries, and you're the one, you as the parent are the one to enforce the rules and boundaries, to bring the boundaries back when your children push them. Okay? So you're the one to sustain the rules and boundaries. So in regards to how they are with each other, they respect each other, they play with each other. I did a video on how to, keep the children, their siblings with each other, playing nicely and, keeping rivalry on a low. I did a whole different video on that. But how your children interact with each other, that's another area. So you have a rule and a boundary around that. How do they interact with each other? How do they talk to each other? I have known parents in the past who the children just treat each other anyhow, swear at each other, shout at each other, hit each other. So there's a rule and a boundary around that. Have a rule and a boundary around it. That this is how you talk to your brother. This is how you deal with your sister. So that's a rule and a boundary. And of course, when they push those rules and boundaries, you're the one to bring it back. So the third one, the rule and boundary in the home, how they treat the home, they should all have chores to do. It should be a rule and a boundary that we keep the house clean, keep the house tidy. We don't just come home from school, come home from work, and we just throw our coats anywhere, kick off our shoes anywhere. We leave the kitchen in a mess for days at a time. Of course, the kitchen sink will get full, but there's a rule and a boundary around who's doing the washing up. Do your children have a rota on when and who's doing the washing up? Whose turn is it to clean the sitting room? Whose turn is it to do different chores around the house? Have a rule and a boundary around how your children look after their home. They should all be looking after and cleaning their own rooms from once they get to a certain age. And you can decide what that age is. But your children should be keeping their rooms clean. Have a small waste paper basket in their room so they can throw away their own rubbish. And let them know the days that the bin men come. So they bring their rubbish to the main bin and it's thrown away. Those small rules and boundaries in your house just help your home to tick along nicely. And like I said, when the boundaries are pushed, children don't want to follow rules and boundaries. They don't want to listen. They don't want to. You just bring the boundary back in place. You just bring the boundary where it needs to be. And as your children are getting older, they know this boundary, we can play with it a little bit, but this boundary is a non-negotiable. This is what we need to do in our house. This is how we interact with our parents. This is how we interact with each other. And this is how we treat our home. So I just hope that helps you helps you to put things in your home, rules and boundaries. And I often speak to parents who they've not had rules and boundaries when their children were young. And now their children are older and they are now trying to put rules and boundaries in place. That does happen. Again, start with what the rules and boundaries are. Tell your children what the rules and boundaries are. And when they push them, you bring them back. Of course, it's going to be harder if your children are older, if you've not taught them how to, stay within rules and boundaries. But you're the one to enforce the rules and boundaries. You're the ones to make sure that where the parameters are on your rules and boundaries and your routines, what time you're doing things, what time they're going to bed, what time they're waking up. Rules, boundaries and routines, you're in control of those. And then you're the one to implement them and to make sure they are sustained. Okay, so I hope that helps all the parents who want to set rules and boundaries. Like I said before, if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that. And if you have subscribed, thank you so much. I so appreciate you. So remember, all parents are great parents. It's a journey and we will get there. Thank you.